Now, we're going to talk about Trump's cabinet. I mentioned earlier, I took a social media break for about 3 weeks, and that was a couple days after the election. It was just a good time for me to take some time off. So I haven't been reporting too much in the last few weeks on this. I haven't done a live show since the election. I did one the day before telling you guys not to vote. And as I reported recently, guess what? The non-voters won. More people chose not to vote than voted for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, even if you believe their garbage numbers. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about reality. Look, the fact is Donald Trump is going to be the next president, and within just over 30, 40 days or so. And there's a lot of kind of tension and uncertainty about what he's going to do and how many promises he's going to break and how much of a tyrant he'll be, or will he really make America great or something like that. I think we can all sort of see what's happening, but nevertheless, I haven't been on to report about that. So we're going to be talking all about that tonight, giving you, I've got a good amount of links open available here. We're about to go through and giving you the real information about why you shouldn't trust Donald Trump's incoming cabinet. And not just, people who hate Trump because whatever sort of nonsense they've heard, but legitimate reasons. And namely, as I've pointed out several times in the last year or so, as it's become apparent it was happening, that the technocrats have lined up behind Donald Trump. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, even Alex Karp at Palantir, who backed Kamala Harris. He seems to be getting, embracing Trump now, and others. And this is not by mistake. This is by design. And we're going to talk about this tonight as we go through and show you the many different reasons that Elon Musk is partnering with Donald Trump and Peter Thiel and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get into this. First, let's start with the mainstream look at things. This was coming from Fareed Zakaria, who I guess he's a contributor to the Washington Post occasionally, and he used to work, or maybe still does work, for CNN. And he wrote here, the Democrats' three big mistakes. They mishandled immigration, identity politics, and the pileup of Trump's prosecutions. And so he's kind of saying, this guy's no Trump supporter, but I just thought it was interesting just to start with how even if you just take the most mainstream level of version of events, which I don't personally, but even if you look at that level, that the so-called left, the progressives, the Democrats, they increasingly went further and further left and really alienated a lot of so-called middle of America and just regular people who aren't really hardcore on gender ideology or don't, blindly just want to let anybody in the country. It doesn't mean they're racist or they're hateful people, but when they hear stories about immigrants being allowed into the country after committing murders and then getting arrested, and then in liberal progressive cities, the judges letting them out without bail or with little to no bail, and then they get to go out and kill other people or commit more crimes. Those sort of things really caused a lot of people to wake up, and many of them unfortunately went towards Trump. Now, back in the conspiratorial mindset, if I put my tinfoil hat back on, I would say, and as I have been saying for the last 8 years, this is all done by design. The whole goal was to create this false anti-establishment hero in the form of Donald Trump. They want the left to get as extreme and crazy as possible so that people have this reaction we're describing here. And then what does it do? It drives them to the other side because so many people are stuck within this false dichotomy, this false binary. And so I think that this has all been done by design. But nevertheless, let's look at what Zakaria said here. He said, the first big error was the Biden administration's blindness to the collapse of the immigration system and the chaos at the border. An asylum system that was meant for a small number of persecuted individuals was being used by millions to gain legal entry. Instead of shutting it down, liberals branded anyone protesting as heartless and racist. They missed a massive shift in the American public opinion in just a few years. In 2020, the percentage of Americans who wanted to decrease immigration was 28%, but by this year, it was 55%. And then they talk about how Kamala Harris went on The View, and they said, would you have done anything different than Biden? She said no, and she should have said, I would have shut down the border early and hard, and basically saying, she missed out. And then he also says they got a bit overzealous with trying to go after Trump and really, lawfare. It says lawfare turned Trump from a loser to a victim. And as his list of indictments grew, his campaign contributions increased and his poll numbers solidified. And this other one I think is important too, the dominance of identity politics on the left, which made Democrats push for all kinds of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, or DEI, that largely came out of the urban academic bubble, but alienated many mainstream people. There is an irony in claiming to be pro-Latino by insisting that people use the term Latinx which I've never used. I don't know anybody who does actually use it. It is just like they said, it's like this left-wing progressive academic bubbles who try to push these trends on people. And it says only to discover that Latinos themselves think the word is kind of weird. This kind of obsession made Democrats view people too much through their ethnic or racial or gender identity. And it made them miss, for example, that working class Latinos were moving forward towards Trump because they were socially conservative or liked his macho rhetoric or even agreed with his hardline stance on immigration. One of Trump's most effective ads ended with the tagline, "Kamala is for they, them. Trump is for you." Pretty good. But nevertheless, I think that there is some truth there that the mainstream, if you're just looking from that mainstream perspective, and if you want to give any merit to their numbers, which I typically don't, they fucked up by going hardcore with identity politics and immigration and things like that. And they couldn't admit it. They couldn't let it go, and they still can't let it go. So, I think it was largely done by design. Now, I will say, for an even deeper dive, I'm going to be sharing my personal perspective on, Trump's cabinet. But if you want the latest word from the Independent Media Alliance, which is, of course, an alliance organized by myself, Ryan Christian, and Whitney Webb, which features a dozen different independent media journalists and podcasters. Our website will be launching very soon, hopefully by the end of this year, before the end of the year, thanks to the folks over on Odyssey. They're really building us a censorship-proof platform, and you're going to see a lot more coming from the IMA. But this panel featured myself, Ryan, Kit Knightley of Off Guardian, Catherine Austin Fitz of the Solari Report, Steve of Slow News Day, Hjorve of Geopolitics and Empire, and again, myself. And we talked all about Trump's cabinet picks and policy proposals. I'm actually going to play you guys a quick clip from this to sort of understand my main perspective on the problems associated with Trump's cabinet picks here. So let's go ahead and just take a quick look at this. This is from the most recent IMA panel, and then we'll continue on looking at how the technocrats are all up in Trump's shit right now.
And for me, the big one is technocracy or big tech. I think that's the key. And I had a chat yesterday with Patrick Wood of Technocracy, and he's going to give a presentation this weekend, he said, but he's talking about techno-populism. And I think that's sort of the cutting edge of all of this. And again, the definition of technopopulism says it's either a populism in favor of technocracy or a populism concerning certain technology, usually information technology or any populist ideology conversed using digital media. It can be employed by single politicians or whole political movements, respectively. And it says neighboring terms used are technocratic populism, technological populism, and cyber populism. And to me, that sounds a lot like the Trump administration with Elon Musk, where they've merged populism with technocracy. And that just seems to be, I think, what they're going to be doing.
I'd like to jump in here real quick if I could. I'm going to have to jump off in a few minutes. But basically, to pick up there on the techno-populism angle, I think that is really important. And besides maybe some potentials like Kit was talking about for Trump to do some anti-establishment things to try to get his street cred back. I think we can already clearly see what Steve was talking about, the numerous people who are associated with Israel, who have, outright supported Israel and Zionism. Trump's already saying he's going to lift any limits on arms deals to Israel. He's already saying, as soon as he gets into office, they're going to start limiting free speech on campuses to go after anti-Semitic propaganda. So I think we're going to see the increase in that. And in terms of the technocracy aspect, Jim O'Neill, who is appointed or at least nominated to HHS Deputy Secretary, who would serve under RFK if they're both chosen, he is a former CEO of Peter Thiel's the Thiel Foundation. So I mean, that to me is, everybody here and hopefully in the audience is aware of Peter Thiel and understands the importance of that. I'm also working on another investigation for TLAV right now, looking deeper into Elon Musk and specifically his role. Why he's so much embracing Donald Trump. And I think there's some really clear, obvious examples. That would be, for one, he stands to benefit immensely financially from all the different military-industrial complex contracts that his companies have. And I'm specifically looking at his Star Shield program, which started to be reported on late in 2023. And it has, bits of information have been dripping out this year. But what we've come to realize is that it's a $1.8 billion classified contract. And more and more details are pointing to that the contract's probably with the National Reconnaissance Office, which handles all the satellites and the surveillance around the planet. And using Starlink and in this Star Shield program, Musk, especially now with Trump in office, it can expect to get more financial business, but also to help the military industrial complex, the U.S. military, the U.S. intelligence apparatus, to have the ability, in their own words, to see anyone anywhere on the planet to a degree that they've never had before, where they're basically saying the head of the NRO in a recent discussion about this said there will be nowhere for anybody to hide. Of course, they're saying this is just for bad guys, for terrorists. But I think that's another aspect of creating this technocrat dream of being able to monitor everything on the planet and in order to allocate resources, of course, terrorism, catch bad guys, all that sort of stuff. That to me is another big picture that a lot of the Trump supporters aren't seeing. And I'll just throw this one in real briefly since I can't be on too long today. But Trump also just this week announced Chad Cronister, who's currently a sheriff in Florida. He's supposed to head the DEA. Just one interesting connection here that our fellow IMA member Whitney Webb has written about in her book. The sheriff Chad Cronister, his wife is Nikki, what is the name? DeBartolo, and her father, Edward DeBartolo Sr. He was known for his mafia connections going back to Ohio, where he was in business with Les Wexner, who of course was one of the financiers behind Jeffrey Epstein, and Les Wexner was part of the mega group, which of course goes back to Israel and Mossad connections there. So this sheriff out of Florida, who's being appointed at the head of DEA, his wife and her family have connections to the mafia, and her brother actually used to own the San Francisco 49ers, and he was fined like $1 million and given a felony conviction for some shady business deals he did. Trump actually pardoned him during his first term. So again, you can see that sort of coming full circle. Trump pardons a friend, and then that friend's brother-in-law is appointed to be DEA, head of the DEA. So, I think we're seeing a lot of just swampy different connections going on that hopefully more and more people will be paying attention to. So that was the clip from the IMA panel. And again, you can find that at theconsciousresistance.com. I just asked on the chat here, and I will ask again here for anybody who's watching elsewhere, how many people are familiar with Starshield? I'd love to see in the comments. I'm going to be talking more about Starshield in just a few moments. Which is a program launched related to Starlink, which you're probably more familiar with, related to Elon Musk. But if you want to see the full, where that clip just came from, you want to see the full thing, go to theconsciousresistance.com. You can see Trump admin 2024, and stay tuned for more from the Independent Media Alliance. We're going to have a lot more to cover. So let's dive into this. Let's go further into Trump's cabinet. Once again, I like to start with like the mainstream view on things and show you that even from the mainstream, you don't have to be a full-on conspiracy theorist, although they always miss important pieces of the puzzle. You can still look at this from a mainstream perspective and still gain some truth and see that, for one, in this case, Trump is not your friend. The Atlantic calling it out, fill the swamp. Trump's appointees are putting lobbyists and industry leaders into positions of immense government power. And they say this, as the 2016 presidential election drew to an end, Donald Trump began using a new slogan, drain the swamp. It was a neat encapsulation of his critique of his Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton, and of the country's governing establishment of two parties, which he painted as corrupt, cozy, and self-dealing. These days, the catchphrase has begun to vanish from his repertoire. Last month, the Washington Post calculated that Trump had used drain the swamp only 59 times on Truth Social in the past 2 years, fewer times than he wrote about it in all of 2016 in October alone. So in the last 2 years, he's only said drain the swamp 59 times, but going back to October 2016, he was saying it, more than that in just 1 month. And the shift isn't just semantic. Trump's staffing decisions, his transition design, and his own behavior show that he is uninterested in even keeping up his appearances this time. Trump himself will never say it, but the credo of his second term is coming into focus. Fill the swamp. Now, one of the most obvious examples of this is what we've talked about. Again, I didn't do any reporting on this, but I posted it on social media before my break. You probably have heard about it right now and seen this article going around about Susie Wiles, who is Trump's White House chief of staff now. She was a registered lobbyist. She's been a part of Trump's team for a while. She was part of Ballard Partners, which is a lobby. They lobby for a bunch of different corporate clients. And in 2018, Political magazine called the firm's founder, Brian Ballard, of Ballard Partners, where Trump's chief of staff now used to work, the most powerful lobbyist in Trump's Washington. And there's even further, I think it's Susie Wiles. She also worked for the company Mercury that many of you have probably seen about. There's some big pharma connections. So his own literal chief of staff is a lobbyist, basically. But then it goes even further. Pam Bondi, who is Trump's nominee for Attorney General, she also worked for this Ballard Partners lobbying firm, where her clients included the Qatari government, Amazon, and Uber. Trump's pick for transportation secretary worked as a lobbyist at another firm. And in August, funny enough, when Trump was trying to win votes, he went on Theo Von's podcast, talked to all the cool, hip, young dudes. And he said, you have to stop listening to lobbyists. You know, he likes to say things like that. Instead, you just have to hire them. Don't listen to them, just hire them. Let them make decisions. Why listen to them when you can just put them in positions of power? And more and more people are noticing this. You got Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who I wrote about before the election, telling you guys about the technocrats who are supporting Donald Trump. Howard Lutnick is, of course, coming from the financial firm Cantor Fitzgerald. Cantor Fitzgerald had offices in the Twin Towers on 9/11. And just, coincidentally at that day, Howard Lutnick didn't go to work because he had to take his son to kindergarten, he says. And then all his employees died and they lost a lot of money. He got even richer. He's also part of the co-opting the hijacking of Bitcoin and mainstreaming it and turning it into just a digital gold. He's now Trump's commerce secretary. You got the freaking former head of World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, WWF, Linda McMahon. She's supposed to lead the education department. Scott Bessent, who's got a hedge fund mogul. I mean, I could show you guys, but I've already got so many tabs open right now that I don't want to crash my computer. But I have an entire folder. Here, I'm just going to do it. Just called Trump's second term. I don't know if you guys can see these tabs popping up for me. No, it probably won't work. But I've got just an entire folder called Trump's second term, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's at least 20 or 30 different links showing all the different connections between Trump's picks and Zionism. How many, even people who aren't in a position to have anything to do with Israel, have been out there praising Israel, including Pam Bondi, the Florida AG, gushes over the U.S. Embassy and Jerusalem. Trump himself was saying that as soon as he gets into office, they're going to try to stop this anti-Semitic hate. And Trump's number 2 pick for the HHS, I think I might have mentioned this in that clip from the IMA, the Independent Media Alliance. He was actually part of Peter Thiel's Thiel Foundation. I mean, we just keep going on and on and on, but I just wonder how many people are even going to pay attention anymore, because they're like, yeah, but maybe RFK, he might do something. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And of course, there's a few things like, okay, Doge and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, they're going to save us. Although, again, people still don't recognize that those aren't heroes. Those aren't people that are on your team. These are guys that both Ramaswamy and Elon Musk helped develop the mRNA vaccines that were sure used on a lot of people during COVID, in case you didn't notice. These are not your friends. These are technocrats. So I could keep going on, but even from the mainstream perspective of the Atlantic, they're calling it out. And let me go ahead and pull up the article I was going to talk about with RFK. This is another good one from the Atlantic that offers a perspective. Again, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see that maybe all is not what people are being sold. So many people are like, okay, I see what you're saying, Derrick. There sure are a lot of Zionists, and there sure are a lot of bad people that Trump's putting in his cabinet, but we at least got RFK Jr. He's going to be nominated for the HHS. Maybe he'll get in there, and maybe he will, maybe he won't. We'll see either way, right? I'm glad fluoride is being discussed. I'm going to have an article talking about that, how fluoride's in the news, but it's being, they're still lying about it. But this article is called RFK Jr. is in the wrong agency. He would be a great agriculture secretary. And I thought this was interesting. Again, this is just a mainstream perspective, but it's basically saying how that based on the things that RFK has said, based on his recent public statements, he appears much more interested in cutting down on America's consumption of seed oils and frozen school lunch pizza than overseeing the than overseeing the HHS department. Now, it would seem counterproductive to think, well, doesn't HHS have a lot to do with these areas that RFK says he's interested in? Well, apparently not, according to this article and some of my own research into what HHS actually does. It says, if in nominating Kennedy to lead the health department, Trump is kneecapping one of the few bipartisan issues he campaigned on his election: to improve diet and overall health of Americans. If Trump truly wanted RFK Jr. to fulfill his pledge to make America healthy again, he should have picked him for a different job than health secretary. He says, since endorsing Trump, Kennedy has pledged that he will get processed food out of lunch immediately, arguing that the government must stop subsidizing the crops that make seed oils, and urged Trump to stop allowing people to buy soda with federal food benefits. Make America healthy again, talks about getting rid of pesticides, regenerative agriculture, etc. Kennedy won't be able to do any of this as the head of the federal health department. He has already signaled that the EPA, Trump has already signaled that the EPA, which has the power to crack down on pesticides, is off limits to Bobby because he doesn't like oil. So how much power will RFK even have to do anything about what's going on in the EPA remains to be seen. But Kennedy could have been an era-defining leader of the USDA, which regulates school lunches, doles out subsidies for oilseed crops, and sets rules for public assistance programs like SNAP. And it says before being nominated for HHS, RFK even tweeted or posted an Instagram video inside the Department of Agriculture promising that he will enact the MAHA agenda when Donald Trump gets me inside the USDA. So it appeared like Bobby RFK Jr. even believed or may have been told he was going to be appointed to the USDA at first. He literally went to the building and said, hey, when I get into the USDA, I'm going to do all this good stuff. And instead, he gets the HHS position. Now, it could be that they worried, I'm just speculating here, that USDA also obviously has to do with agriculture. And maybe they're like, oh, Bobby, if RFK is too far left, what if he tries to do some climate policies relating to, the agricultural industry or something like that? Nevertheless, he's at the HHS now, and they're saying he will have some ability to ban certain food additives. He'll have direct impact on the next round of federal dietary guidelines, which are due in 2025. But HHS has no power to change Americans' food intake, either indirect or slow. To remove a food ingredient as health secretary, he would have to pressure the FDA to issue ingredient bans. And he might be able to do this because Trump appointed Marty McCary, who's skeptical of vaccines, but also, is not perfect. The point is, it could be quite possibly that RFK was nominated to a position that maybe he's going to get, maybe he won't. But even if he does, he might not even really be able to affect any of the change that people are all putting their hopium in right now. And wouldn't that be interesting? I wouldn't be surprised, because as crazy as that sounds, that's how politics works. And you get screwed, you don't get what you asked for. But let's go now further into the technocracy side of things, which I think is the most important piece of this puzzle. How the technocrats are directly influencing Donald Trump's campaign, and namely, of course, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is of course the big one here that is having an influence. And no, he's not a hero. No, he's not. To all the sycophants on X who can't get his wang out their mouth, like, this guy is not on your side. This guy's making billions of dollars off military industrial complex, and through the Star Shield program, he's helping the U.S. military build the largest satellite surveillance program. Elon Musk joins Trump's call with Ukraine's Zelensky. This was reported right after Trump got elected. Literally a couple days later, Elon Musk joined a Wednesday call between President-elect Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, said 4 people familiar with the matter. Now, it goes on there, says some stuff that's not really important, but this is the one part that I want you guys to understand. Musk, who donated well over $75 million to Trump's campaign, provided logistic support for his voter turnout efforts and extolled the GOP candidate on his social media platform, and has much to gain from his newfound political kinship. His companies, including SpaceX and Tesla, received billions of dollars in government contracts across more than a dozen federal agencies, including the Pentagon, which rely on Musk to launch its military satellites into orbit. Musk's relationships with federal agencies have been contentious in several instances, however, with some of the subject of investigation and review. So it also says here, Ukraine depends heavily on Starlink to provide secure communication among frontline troops to allow constant battlefield monitoring and command centers where internet access may be otherwise spotty. So Elon's already helping the Ukrainian fight by providing Starlink. Tens of thousands of Starlink devices, many spray painted in camouflage colors to avoid Russian detection, are on the front lines. So he's readily involved in the Ukrainian conflict in that way. And there's other ways as well. And they also already kind of touched on the fact that he is, being subsidized by the US government. Let's go on further. Just a little side note here. Palantir, this was announced. The reason I pulled this one up, it's not directly related to Trump's admin, but it happened the days after Trump was elected. Anthropic teams up with Palantir and Amazon Web Services to sell AI to defense customers. Trust me, these names are going to be important if you don't know them yet. Anthropic, remember that? It's going to be important just like Palantir. Anthropic on Thursday said it is teaming up with data analytics firm Palantir to provide U.S. intelligence and defense agencies access to Anthropic's cloud family of cloud, I think is the name of the AI models. The news comes as a growing number of AI vendors look to ink deals with U.S. defense customers for strategic and fiscal reasons. So just another organization working with Palantir of Peter Thiel fame to help the U.S. military. We could go on. Silicon Valley protested Trump in 2016. Now it wants to work with him. And this is something I've been warning about for a while now when I wrote my articles in the last couple of months, pointing out how the technocrats, including those who are involved in trying to mainstream and hijack Bitcoin, have been going all in Donald Trump since they had a private dinner meeting back in April or May in Silicon Valley at David Sacks' house. And David Sacks, formerly of PayPal, part of the PayPal mafia, was recently appointed to AI czar by Donald Trump. It's one big club and you ain't in it. And this article just goes on, just showing how all the technocrats they're slobbing over Trump's knob now, trying to get his support for one reason or another. And it's just the whole technocrat class is backing Trump now. This one shows what might be coming in the near future. Genetic discrimination is coming for us all. Like I kind of mix some of these in here. Hopefully that you'll see how they're all related by the end of this. And this is just talking about how people have been criminalized and discriminated against by their genes. It's already happening. Gattaca is already coming to life. If you don't know the movie Gattaca, you need to know it. Now, the next 3 articles that I'm going to share here are my own articles. Actually, the next 4 articles are my own articles here relating to the Trump administration. Like I said, I've been off social media for a couple of weeks, but I haven't stopped doing my research. I haven't stopped diving into what's actually taking place. And as soon as Trump won office, like I said, with this whole Anthropic and Palantir contract getting signed, as soon as Trump came in office, the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who are the people who are supposedly going to lead Trump's effort to round up millions of Americans who are staying, in the country illegally, people who came to the U.S. illegally, going to round them up and potentially with the help of the military. As soon as Trump got elected, ICE and other federal agencies immediately started getting new contracts with all kinds of firms who stand to make a lot of money during Trump presidency. One of them is called the NS Group, which you might have heard about in the past. So this article I wrote for T-Labs called Meet the Spyware Companies Preparing to Unleash Their Technology During Trump's Second Term. A small but growing number of private companies selling digital tools to hack smartphones and messaging apps like WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram. Surprise, surprise. The founders of it were part of Unit 8200. If you don't know who Unit 8200 is, go to thepyramidofpower.net, check out season 3, and watch our episode on the intelligence agencies. Paragon claims its tools can help law enforcement and governments remotely crack encrypted messaging apps and platforms. The agreement between Paragon and ICE calls for them to create a, quote, fully configured proprietary solution, including license, hardware, warranty, maintenance, and training. Within weeks of the ICE Paragon contract becoming public, all of a sudden the White House said, whoops, we have to review this to see if it violates the 2023 executive order by Biden. We forgot about it. Last year, we put out an executive order that was restricting these exact type of contracts. Oops, now we're trying to sign one. Let's review it. So that's currently being reviewed. And it's because the Biden administration is at least paying lip service to fighting spyware. Now, for those who don't understand this term spyware, it comes from software, right? So software is a type of program that you can load into your device, your phone, your computer. Spyware is software something that can be loaded onto a device that spies on people, and it can be remotely loaded. So this doesn't mean you have to actually get someone's computer and put a chip in it or put in a USB drive and then infect them. You can do this remotely. This is how the government operates and how private companies operate. They have developed spyware and they're selling it to law enforcement and to governments around the world.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.